Hello everybody, it is Thursday the 26th of October and it's a bit drizzly and cold outside. I think our spell of warm weather, unseasonably warm weather, has ended and we're beginning to get the true autumnal October weather that we would normally have at this time of year. I'm in a fairly reflective mood today. I had to do the most unenviable part of my job today. About 6 months ago, one of our buses was involved in a fatal collision with a cyclist, and the inquest into the cyclist's death was held today. And for those who are not aware, an inquest is held into any death in the UK where the person has either died unexpectedly or died from non-natural causes. And so clearly in the case of a road traffic collision, it isn't a natural death. I'm not going to discuss the case. For those who are interested, they'll be able to find out about it. You'll be able to find out about it online. I would just like to say that the family of the cyclist, now deceased, conducted themselves with such integrity and concern for the well-being of my colleague who was involved in this collision. They have done everything they can to reassure him that they don't hold him responsible and that he did everything physically he was capable of doing in order to try to avoid the collision, that it was a tragic accident of the most literal kind. And I just wanted to pay tribute to them, because to have that degree of concern for somebody else when you are going through what must be unimaginable suffering yourself it moves me almost to tears to think about it. It's a profound sense of compassion and empathy. So that's, as I say, that's all I want to say on the subject. It was, it is the part of my job I enjoy the least, as you can imagine. But it is a necessary part, and it's also reassuring to know that every life matters, that the circumstances of every death are investigated, that nothing is simply taken at face value, that a proper, thorough, in-depth investigation is carried out to ensure that there is no wrongdoing that goes undetected and unpunished. And although the whole process is very distressing for everybody involved, there is also the sense that this is treating the deceased person with the utmost respect and concern, that they had the right to go through their life unmolested, that we take seriously the possibility that somebody may have deliberately or through carelessness and neglect, negligent acts, taken away their freedom to live. So although it is a very sad and distressing occasion, it can also be, as in this case, an opportunity for the best of people to come out as well. So I'm in a fairly reflective mood, and I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of television programmes that are currently airing in the UK and may be available overseas, I've no idea. And they're both about monasteries and nunneries. And they come at the why do people join monasteries question from radically different angles. So Channel 5, which is one of those commercial channels that does like to create conflict in order to attract viewers, have a series on at the moment about a group of young women who are exposed to a convent of nuns in Norfolk. And the programme is called Bad Habits, Holy Orders. because the young women involved have come perhaps from, shall we say, the wrong side of the tracks. They haven't had the best opportunities in life, and they haven't made the most of the few opportunities that they may have had, and so they have found themselves in low-level trouble with the law, possibly getting involved in drugs and prostitution and the like. Not all of them, but it's a really interesting process of confronting two different lifestyles of women who are independent and strong and who have to try and find a way to exist in a world which is often structurally opposed to women taking independent control of their lives. Even in the 21st century, women are often on the back foot when it comes to the same opportunities in the workplace, in the home, as men, particularly women from the kind of lower social classes that I come from, working class families. And I realise it may sound odd with my accent to hear that I'm from a working class background, but I grew up on a council estate in a post-industrial city with high unemployment, where women were very much second-class citizens, and often still are very much second-class citizens in terms of how they're perceived by men in particular, and also by the state as freeloaders and unworthy, the feckless poor that I was talking about yesterday, if you like. Actually, the day before yesterday, when I was talking about the workhouse estate. And it's not for the faint-hearted. There is a lot of strong language. Both sides are prepared to say things as they find them. And for those women from the wrong side of the tracks, that is a brutal process and approach to life, which isn't for the faint-hearted, as I say. So it's worth watching to see the process by which perhaps these women begin to understand that there is another way of life, and that way of life, even if the intensity of joining a religious order and having faith and living a community life is not for them, that the sense that they are empowered individuals who can make choices for themselves and not be dependent upon the whims of a male patriarchal society, if you like. Which I think probably much of the feminist revolution, in my experience, much of the feminist revolution has happened at the level of educated middle-class people, but has really failed to penetrate into the lower orders, if you like, people like me, or people like I grew up with, certainly. And I suppose I am an exception in some ways, in that I am well-educated, and maybe my generation is the last of the properly well-educated poorer generations, where there was an expectation that Britain was a meritocracy, where achieving good things at school would open up opportunities for you in life, in jobs and so on, and that you weren't bound by the social deprivation of the area in which you were raised. I used to look after HR for my current employer, and Oxford Brookes University, which is a former polytechnic and now quite a high-level university within Oxford, but not part of the historic Oxford University. Their social sciences department wanted to do a self-selecting study of working class men and their attitudes to women in the workplace. And so there was a small bribe, if you like, of a £10 shopping voucher for Tesco, which is a big supermarket brand in the UK. And these people were asked to answer a series of questions on their attitudes to modern life, women in modern life. And some of the responses were culturally and religiously determined. We have a sizable minority of Muslim employees from either themselves British Pakistani or quite a number actually of first generation immigrants Pakistani employees, but also the white male employees who grew up and their parents were working class, they are working class, their children are working class. And a staggering 78% of these men believed that the woman's place was in the home and not at work, and that they would feel threatened if their wife had a better job and was earning more money than they were. That they saw their role as men to be the principal breadwinner, to be the home provider, to be the authority and the discipline within the home. And it's staggering, really, that in the 21st century, that attitude is still so endemic within the working class population, be it Muslim or be it white. There was very little, or if rather than choosing religious identities, because I think that's actually an unfair generalization anyway, a cultural identity, whether it's a South Asian identity or whether it is a sub-Saharan African identity or whether it's a white European identity, this sense of women not being an equal part of the workforce is quite deeply entrenched. So I'll be intrigued to see how these young women progress in their understanding of themselves and of how they can actually take control of their lives in a less destructive way, perhaps, than they've done so in the past. Excuse me a second, I'm just having an Irish whiskey. After the day I've had, I just wanted to have something to help me to unwind again. Oh, that is good. The other programme is actually on the BBC and is an example of the new phenomenon of slow TV. And it is a series of programmes which are following a day in the life of monks from different monasteries. And the first episode was about Downside Abbey and was on, was it yesterday? It was yesterday, yes. And is available on iPlayer in the UK. As I say, I have no idea if these programmes are available overseas. And I believe the programme was called Monastery, a meditation on life, something like that. I can't remember the exact title, but it's something along those lines. And the first episode was based at Downside Abbey, which is down near Bath in Somerset, and is a sister house of my own monastery at Ampleforth. In fact, it's technically the older sister in that it was founded the year before my monastery was refounded in France after the English Reformation during the reign of James I, but is younger in the sense that after the French Revolution, when the monks were kicked out of France, my monastery was established before Downside. So there's a kind of sibling rivalry as to who is the older sister. And because they are English Benedictines and because they've had the same experience historically and culturally as we at Ampleforth have had, there are huge similarities in the rhythms of their day and the rhythms of my day as a monk of Ampleforth. And in some ways, the programme is actually answering the question, why the monastic life? Why do people join monasteries? And what is this call, this vocation that people are responding to? And it's a very powerful programme because it gives a real sense of the ebb and flow and the directive purpose of the daily life of the monk. That the day is very strongly structured around the prayer services, around meals and around work, and that you move from one to the next in a rolling program through the day, and there is no surprise. You know what is coming next, you're prepared for what's coming next, you take part in what comes next, and then the next thing comes, and then the next thing comes. And whilst within your work there may be unusual details, and whilst the prayer services will fluctuate depending upon the time of the year and the nature of the feast that you're celebrating, they broadly retain the same structure through the day. And so it's a very rhythmic pulsing of the day. You begin in the night with prayer, with public prayer, and then you have your private prayer, and then you have the public prayer, and then you have your breakfast, and then you have your morning work, and then you have the midday prayer, and then you have your afternoon work, your meal rather, and then you have your afternoon work, and then you have a a cup of tea and a piece of bread and butter or whatever, and then the evening work, and then evening prayer, and then the evening meal, and then nighttime recreation of an hour or so with your brethren, chatting about your day and things that are coming up, and then finally compline and the completion of the day and the great silence, and you go to bed, or you sit up and mark some textbook exercise books if you're a teacher, or whatever it happens to be, but you do it in complete silence. And so it is slow TV, and it reminds me of a book written by one of my brethren many moons ago about life in a monastery, entitled The Unexciting Life. And it really is unexciting in the sense that everything is predictable, everything is known. There isn't anything there are shocks to the system, whatever it might happen to be, but generally speaking, your day is planned out, and there is no surprise of where you're going. And it's very boring in one sense, but it's, as I say, it comes to the answer to the question, why join a monastery? And for me, and I think for the feeling you get from these programs, certainly from the first one, is because there is more to our life than frenetic activity and mindless entertainment, that there is a deeper integrity to our lives as human beings, with or without faith in a divine entity, with or without the example of one's forebears and one's contemporaries. There is a sense of something deeper. And for me, that encapsulates and enshrines why I became a monk and what I miss about being a monk. I mean, my life has purpose and integrity now, but it's of a different kind and a different order to that which I experienced as a monk. And I would suspect that many of my brethren would say pretty much the same thing if they were living the experience that I'm now living, having lived the experience that I lived with them. So if you are able to catch these programs, I can strongly recommend them, although they are radically different approaches to the same idea, and the programs themselves are radically different in their feel and the exposition that they give. The outcomes, I suspect, will be pretty close to each other, for the reason that they are, in fact, talking about the same thing, which is about life, about who we are and who we want to be, and how we can be that person best. So I'm going to stop there for today. I'm going to take a little bit of time to reflect and to pray and to recover from today, and I will look forward to speaking to you all again tomorrow. So until then, bye-bye. Hello again, everyone. I've just been watching back the recording that I've made, and I think I misspoke slightly, and I just wanted to correct an impression that might be in your minds about what I was trying to say concerning women and the workplace and women in the home. What I was trying to say rather ineffectually is that my belief is, my personal view of this matter, is that it is for a woman to decide whether she wants to have a career in the world or whether she wants to have a career as a mother. And obviously that conversation is a conversation that intimately involves her husband. My concern was merely that in the white working class culture I come from, and speaking with some of the findings of this particular research that was done by Brookes University, there is a paternalistic attitude where the man makes that decision for the woman and for himself, regardless of the woman's view. I myself, my mother was very much a stay-at-home mother. That was a deliberate decision that she and my father made when she first became pregnant. It is also a decision that was almost forced upon her in 1960s Britain because there wasn't maternity leave available to a woman. It was up to an employer to decide whether or not to continue employing a woman he knew to be pregnant, regardless of the stage of her pregnancy. And in fact, my mother's employment was terminated a month before she had intended, because her employer had decided that it was time for her to stop working now that she was a pregnant woman, and she should be thinking of the baby, and it wasn't. And he, as a man, unrelated to her, was making decisions about her life, her body, her decisions that were hers and her husband's to make and not his. And that's really what I was trying to say. So I apologize if anybody thought I was trying to say that somehow anybody who does stay at home is less than someone who doesn't stay at home. But I'm also trying to say that I strongly believe it is down to a couple to decide how they want to run their family. That is their choice. And it shouldn't be a choice which is culturally dictated. It should be a choice that they themselves freely make and decide what is best for them and their children in their family. So I hope that helps to clarify. I'd be more than happy to hear anything that you think or have to say on this matter, and I'll be very interested to see comments below. So I will now stop. So again, until tomorrow, I will say goodbye. So I'll speak to you then. So bye bye for now.